Valith pressed her hand against the cold metal wall and felt the ship dying around her. The quiet elegy had once carried 3,000 Sifrani souls across the stars, but now it drifted through empty space like a forgotten corpse. The engines had failed 7 cycles ago, and the life support systems wheezed and groaned like an old creature taking its final breaths. Valith was the last one alive, and she knew her time was running out. She moved through the darkened corridors with slow and careful steps, her bioluminescent skin casting a faint blue glow against the walls. Her people had always been creatures of light, their bodies shimmering with colors that shifted based on their emotions. But now her glow was weak and flickering, the light of a candle about to die in the wind. The Sithrani had been a peaceful species, known throughout the galaxy for their contributions to medicine and science. They had healed plagues on a dozen worlds and shared their knowledge freely with any who asked. Valith had believed that kindness would be remembered, that the galaxy would protect those who had protected others. She had been so terribly wrong. The Harkin swarm had come without warning, a parasitic nightmare that consumed entire star systems. The swarm did not negotiate or communicate. It simply fed. World after world fell to their hunger, and the Sithrani homeworld burned in a single night. Valith remembered watching from the observation deck as her planet died, the flames visible even from orbit. The survivors had fled aboard the quiet elegy, desperate to find safety among their allies. Surely the species they had helped would help them in return. Surely someone would offer shelter to a dying people. But the galaxy had shown its true face, and that face was cold and calculating. Valith reached the communications room and sank into the worn chair before the console. She had sent distress signals every single day for 47 cycles, broadcasting her position and her desperate need for rescue. The messages went out into the void, carrying her hope with them, and the void sent back nothing but silence and rejection. The first response had come from the Velthri Collective, a species of crystalline beings who prided themselves on pure logic and mathematical precision. Valith had felt hope surge through her chest when their signal arrived, her skin flashing bright with relief. But the message had been short and brutal. We have calculated the resource expenditure required for rescue operations, the Velthri had stated in their emotionless tone. The fuel cost exceeds the value returned. Your species possesses no strategic resources we require. Rescue is not economically viable. We wish you peace in your final moments. Valith had stared at the message for hours, unable to understand how beings could reduce a life to numbers on a balance sheet. She was not a resource to be measured. She was a person, afraid and alone, begging for help. The second response came from the Orvani Dominion, a proud warrior species with vast fleets and powerful weapons. Surely they would not fear the swarm. Surely they would extend protection to refugees fleeing genocide. Harboring Sithrani survivors will attract Harkin attention to our territories, the Orvani commander had replied. We cannot risk our own populations for the sake of yours. Your presence brings danger wherever you go. Do not approach Orvani space, or you will be fired upon. This is your only warning. Valith had wept then, her bioluminescence shifting to deep purple, the color of grief among her people. The Orvani had not offered help. They had offered threats. They saw her not as a victim, but as a liability, a problem to be avoided. She sent more messages, dozens of them, to every species she could reach. The Kethrani hive responded with confusion, unable to comprehend why a single individual mattered when the collective had fallen. The Morvax Trading Guild offered to purchase any valuable cargo she might have, but showed no interest in her survival. The Zilith technocracy asked for detailed scans of Harkin biology in exchange for potential rescue, then stopped responding when she could not provide sufficient data. Finally, Valith had contacted the Galactic Concord, the great alliance that supposedly maintained peace and order across known space. The Concord had been founded on principles of mutual aid and cooperation. Surely, they would not abandon a dying species. The response arrived 3 cycles later. Your distress signal has been received and documented. Your case has been filed for review. Please maintain your current position and await further communication. The Galactic Concord thanks you for your patience. No rescue came. No ships appeared on her sensors. The Concord had acknowledged her existence and then filed her away like an unimportant document, left to gather dust while she slowly died. Valeth understood now that the galaxy operated on a simple principle that she had been too naive to see. Every species looked out for itself. Compassion was calculated. Kindness was conditional, and help only came when it served the interests of those providing it. She had nothing to offer, so she would receive nothing in return. The oxygen reserves showed 12 cycles remaining, maybe 14 if she reduced her activity. The food supplies were nearly exhausted. The heating systems had failed in most sections of the ship, and she huddled in the communications room because it was the last warm place left. She decided to record a final message, not because anyone would hear it, but because she needed to speak before the silence took her forever. "My name is Valeth of the Sithrani people," she said into the recorder, her voice barely above a whisper. "I am the last survivor of the colony ship Quiet Elegy, and I am going to die alone in the darkness between stars. I called for help, and no one came. I begged for mercy, and no one listened. I do not know if anyone will ever find this message, but I want someone to know that we existed. We were real. We mattered." Her bioluminescence flickered and dimmed as tears rolled down her face, and she curled into herself, waiting for the end. Then the communications console crackled with static, and a new signal cut through the emptiness. It was messy and unrefined, broadcasting on frequencies so old that Valeth barely recognized them. The voice that came through was strange and warm, speaking a language her translator struggled to process. "This is the salvage vessel Borrowed Time, responding to distress signals in this sector. Is anyone out there? Does anyone need help? We are changing course to investigate. If you can hear this, please respond. We are coming." Valeth stared at the console, her skin flickering with confused colors. She had never heard of this species before. She did not recognize their language or their ship designation. But someone had heard her. Someone was coming. For the first time in 47 cycles, Valeth felt something other than despair. She reached for the transmitter with trembling hands and whispered into the microphone, "Please, please help me. I am here." And somewhere in the void, the strange ship called Borrowed Time turned toward her and flew faster. The ship that emerged from the darkness was the ugliest vessel Valeth had ever seen. It was a patchwork monster of welded metal plates and salvage parts, held together by cables and brackets that looked ready to snap at any moment. The hull was scarred and dented, painted in mismatched colors where repairs had been made with whatever materials were available. Compared to the sleek vessels of the Voltheri or the massive warships of the Orvani, this thing looked like it had been assembled by children from scraps found in a junkyard. But it was real, and it was coming for her. Valeth watched through the observation window as the strange ship maneuvered alongside the Quiet Elegy, moving with surprising grace despite its rough appearance. She could see figures moving behind the windows, shapes that were unlike any species she knew. They stood on 2 legs like the Orvani, but they were softer, without armor or scales. The communications console crackled again with that warm and messy voice. "Quiet Elegy, this is Captain Alara Vance of the Borrowed Time. We are preparing to dock and send a boarding party. Please respond if you are able. We are here to help." Valeth wanted to respond, but fear had frozen her throat. She had been alone for so long, and she had learned that the galaxy was cruel. What if these strangers were pirates? What if they wanted to harvest her body for parts, as some species did with rare creatures? What if this was simply another form of cruelty dressed in kind words? She retreated from the communications room and hid herself in a storage compartment, pressing her body into the shadows. Her bioluminescence dimmed until she was barely visible, an old survival instinct from a time when her ancestors had hidden from predators. She would watch these strangers first. She would see what they truly wanted. The docking clamps engaged with a loud clang that echoed through the dead ship. Valith heard the hiss of airlocks opening and the sound of footsteps, heavy and confident, moving through the corridors. There were 5 of them, she realized as she listened. 5 voices, speaking to each other in that strange and energetic language. Her translator was working better now, picking up words and meanings as it learned the new speech patterns. "Oxygen levels are critical in here," one voice said, deep and concerned. "Whoever sent that signal does not have much time left." "Then we move fast," a female voice replied, and Valith recognized it as the captain. "Jin, you have the medical kit? Tomas, get the portable heaters from the cargo bay. This place is freezing." "Already on it, Cap," another voice answered. Valith pressed herself deeper into the shadows and watched through a crack in the storage door as the strangers passed by. They were fascinating and terrifying creatures, with soft skin in various shades of brown and pink, covered in strange fabric garments. Their eyes were small compared to Sithrani eyes, but they moved constantly, scanning everything around them with obvious curiosity. They called themselves humans, her translator informed her, a species that had only achieved space travel 2 centuries ago. They were considered primitive by galactic standards, too emotional and too reckless to be taken seriously. Other species called them pack bonders, a term of mockery for creatures who formed irrational attachments to anyone and anything. The humans spread through the ship, calling out in gentle voices, asking if anyone was there. They did not ransack the vessel or steal valuable equipment. They were looking for survivors, moving with purpose toward the communications room where Valith had sent her signals. "Found something," one of them called out, a young man with dark hair and kind eyes. "There are personal belongings here. Someone was living in this room recently. The blankets are still warm." Captain Ilara Vance entered the communications room and looked around with a worried expression. She was a tall woman with short gray hair and a face marked by scars and smile lines. Her eyes were tired but warm, and she moved with the careful confidence of someone who had seen many difficult things. "They cannot have gone far," Ilara said softly. "The ship is not that big. Jin, is there anywhere else with life support?" "Scanning now," the medic replied, a slender person with gentle hands and quick movements. "I am picking up a faint heat signature in the storage section. Very faint. They might be hiding." Valith felt her heart's race as the humans turned and walked toward her hiding place. She wanted to run, but there was nowhere to go. She wanted to fight, but she was too weak. All she could do was press herself into the corner and hope they would not find her. The storage door slid open, and light flooded into the darkness. Captain Ilara Vance looked down at Valith with an expression that the Sithrani could not understand. It was not hunger or calculation or cold assessment. It was something softer, something that made the captain's eyes shine with moisture. "Oh, sweetheart," Ilara whispered, and her voice cracked with emotion. "What have they done to you?" Valith stared up at the human, too terrified to speak. Her bioluminescence flickered wildly, shifting through colors of fear and confusion and desperate hope. She was certain that this creature would hurt her, would abandon her, would calculate her value and find her wanting. But Ilara did something that no species had done in 47 cycles. She knelt down on the cold metal floor, bringing herself to Valith's level. and she smiled with such warmth that it felt like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. "Hey there," Elara said gently. "My name is Elara. We received your distress signal, and we came as fast as we could. You are safe now. We have got you. Everything's going to be okay." Valith could not understand. This made no sense. The humans had nothing to gain from saving her. She was a stranger from a dead species with no resources to offer. Why would they come? Why would they care? Why? Valith managed to whisper, her voice rough from disuse. "Why did you come?" Elara reached out slowly and carefully, giving Valith time to pull away, and rested her hand on the Sithrani's thin shoulder. The touch was warm and gentle, and Valith realized she had not felt kindness in so long that she had forgotten what it was. "Because you needed help," Elara said simply, as if that explained everything. "And we were close enough to answer. That is all the reason we need." The other humans gathered around, their faces filled with concern and compassion. Jin immediately began scanning Valith with medical equipment, murmuring about dehydration and malnutrition. Tomas wrapped a heated blanket around her shoulders, and another human offered her water in a container designed for different mouths. They carried Valith aboard the borrowed time like she was something precious, something worth protecting. They gave her the warmest cabin on the ship and stayed with her through the night, talking to her even when she could not respond. And Valith, who had accepted that she would die alone and forgotten, began to wonder if perhaps the galaxy was not as cruel as she had believed. Perhaps she had simply been asking the wrong species for help. News traveled fast through the subspace communication networks of the galaxy. Within 3 cycles, every major power knew that a human salvage vessel had rescued a Sithrani survivor from the void. The information spread through diplomatic channels and trading posts, whispered between merchants and announced in government halls. A primitive species had done what the civilized galaxy refused to do, and this fact made many powerful beings very uncomfortable. Valith knew none of this during her first days aboard the borrowed time. She drifted in and out of consciousness, her body fighting to recover from weeks of starvation and cold. The humans surrounded her with warmth and care, feeding her small portions of nutrient paste that Jin had created by studying ancient Sithrani medical texts. "I cannot believe this worked," Jin muttered while checking Valith's vital signs for the 20th time. "I found the recipe in a database that has not been updated in 60 years. Sithrani biology is fascinating. Your cells process energy through bioluminescence, which means you need specific light wavelengths to properly digest food. Tomas, we need to rig up some UV lamps in here." "On it," Tomas called from somewhere in the ship. He was the engineer, a broad man with clever hands and a habit of talking to machines like they were old friends. "Come on, old girl, give me one more good connection. There we go. You are beautiful when you cooperate." Valith listened to the humans with growing wonder. They argued and laughed and complained, their emotions visible on their faces like open books. They did not hide their feelings behind cold logic or political calculation. When they were happy, they smiled. When they were worried, they frowned. When they were determined, their jaws set firm and their eyes grew bright. It was so different from every other species she had known. Captain Elara visited every few hours, bringing small gifts that she thought might help. A pillow from her own cabin, a music player loaded with soft melodies, a blanket that the crew had all signed with messages of hope and welcome. "The others wanted you to know you are not alone anymore," Elara explained as she draped the blanket over Valith's thin frame. "Marcus drew that little picture in the corner there. He's not much of an artist, but he tried his best." Valith traced her fingers over the crude drawing of a sun and felt her bioluminescence shift to soft gold, the color of gratitude. These humans barely knew her. They had no obligation to care. And yet they gave freely, without expectation of return. "I do not understand your species," Valeth whispered. Alara laughed, a warm sound that filled the small cabin. "Honestly, most of the galaxy does not understand us either. They think we are crazy for caring so much. But we cannot help it. When we see someone suffering, something inside us just refuses to look away." "The other species call you pack bonders," Valeth said carefully, unsure if the term would offend. "They do," Alara agreed without shame. "They mean it as an insult. They think forming attachments to strangers is irrational and foolish. But you know what? I would rather be foolish and kind than logical and cruel. The galaxy has enough coldness already." On the 5th day, the warnings began to arrive. The first came from the Orvani Dominion, a formal transmission delivered in harsh military tones. "Human vessel borrowed time. You are hereby notified that harboring Sithrani refugees is a violation of Sector 7 quarantine protocols. Any vessel carrying Sithrani survivors will be denied docking rights at all Orvani stations. Failure to comply will result in permanent blacklisting from Dominion space." Alara read the message aloud to the crew during their evening meal. The humans listened with expressions ranging from annoyance to anger. "Wow," said Marcus, the youngest crew member with wild red hair and a quick temper. "They can take their protocols and shove them somewhere uncomfortable." "Marcus," Alara warned, but she was smiling. The second warning came from the Volthari Collective, delivered in their usual emotionless manner. "Analysis indicates that your current course of action reduces your probability of survival by 34%. Harboring a Sithrani increases the likelihood of Harkin swarm detection. Logical recommendation: abandon the Sithrani at the nearest neutral station and resume standard operations." Jin crumpled the printout into a ball and tossed it into the recycler. Logic without compassion is just cruelty with extra steps. The third warning came from the Galactic Concord itself, wrapped in diplomatic language, but carrying a clear threat. The Concord reminds all independent vessels that interference with designated quarantine species may result in sanctions, fines, and revocation of trading licenses. We urge the crew of the Borrowed Time to reconsider their current humanitarian activities. Alara deleted each message without reply. Valeth discovered this when she finally felt strong enough to leave her cabin and explore the ship. She found Alara in the communications room, clearing yet another threatening transmission from her console. "You are receiving warnings because of me," Valeth said quietly, her glow dimming with guilt. Alara spun around in her chair, surprised but not upset. "You should not be out of bed yet. Jin will have my head." "Captain Vance, please," Valeth pressed. "I have seen the messages. The Orvani, the Velthari, the Concord. They are punishing you for saving me. You will lose your docking rights, your trading licenses, everything you need to survive." Alara stood and walked to Valith, taking the Sithrani's delicate hands in her own rough and calloused ones. "Listen to me carefully, Valith. Those messages mean nothing. They are just words from people who are too afraid to do the right thing. We are not going to abandon you because some bureaucrats sent us angry letters. But the cost? There is no cost," Alara interrupted firmly. "Not for something like this. You are crew now, whether you like it or not. And crew does not abandon crew. That is not how humans work." Valith felt her bioluminescence flare bright, shifting through colors she had not felt in months. Hope, belonging, love. She did not have words for what she was feeling, so she simply gripped Alara's hands tighter and let her glow speak for her. That night, the crew gathered for dinner in the common room, and for the first time, Valith joined them at the table. They made space for her without hesitation, adjusting the lighting to match her needs and offering her specially prepared food. They told jokes she did not understand and laughed at stories she could not follow, but they included her in every moment. When Valith asked why they had risked everything for a stranger, Tomas looked at her with gentle confusion. "What kind of question is that?" he asked. "You needed help? You were alone and scared and dying. What were we supposed to do? Just fly away?" "Every other species did," Valith answered honestly. The humans exchanged glances that Valith could not read. Then Marcus shook his head and said something that she would remember for the rest of her very long life. Then every other species was wrong, and someone had to be right. Valith looked around the table at these strange, primitive, irrational creatures who had given her everything and asked for nothing in return. They were messy and emotional and completely illogical by galactic standards. And they were the kindest beings she had ever known. The alarm shrieked through the borrowed time like a wounded animal. Valith had been learning to play cards with Marcus when the sound erupted, and she watched the young human transform in an instant. The playful smile vanished from his face, replaced by sharp focus and grim determination. He was on his feet and running toward the bridge before the first alarm cycle had finished. "Battle stations." Alara's voice boomed over the ship's speakers. "We have contacts on long-range sensors. Everyone to positions now." Valith followed on trembling legs, her bioluminescence flickering with terror she could not control. She knew what this alarm meant. She had heard it before, aboard the Quiet Elegy, in the final moments before her world ended. The Harken swarm had found them. The bridge of the borrowed time was small and cramped, packed with outdated equipment and screens that flickered unreliably. The crew gathered at their stations, their faces pale but focused. Alara stood at the center, her eyes locked on the main display. 3 shapes moved across the screen, organic forms that pulsed with sickly bioluminescence. Harken bioships were living creatures, engineered by some ancient and terrible intelligence to consume everything in their path. Each one was the size of a small moon, filled with billions of parasitic organisms that could strip a planet bare in hours. 3 contacts, Jin announced, voice tight with controlled fear. Moving to intercept. They will reach us in approximately 20 minutes. Can we outrun them? Tomas asked from the engineering station. No, Alara said flatly. Harken bioships are faster than anything we have. If we run, they catch us. If we hide, they find us. Our only option is to fight. Valith's heart sank. Fight? The borrowed time was a salvage vessel held together by hope and spare parts. It had no weapons worth mentioning, no shields capable of stopping Harken attacks. Fighting the swarm with this ship was like fighting a hurricane with an umbrella. Captain, this is suicide, she whispered. Alara turned and met Valith's eyes with a steady gaze. Maybe, but running just means dying tired. At least this way, we go down swinging. She turned back to her crew, and her voice filled the bridge with fierce determination. Listen up. I know the odds are bad. I know this is not what any of us signed up for. But we have someone depending on us, and I will not let those things take her. Not today, not ever. So we fight. We fight with everything we have, and we make them pay for every inch they take. The crew responded with grim nods and clenched fists. No one argued. No one suggested surrendering Valith to save themselves. They simply prepared for battle like it was the most natural thing in the world. The communications console crackled with an incoming transmission. Alara answered, and the cold voice of a Velthari representative filled the bridge. Human vessel, our sensors detect Harken bioships in your vicinity. Logic dictates that surrender of the Sithrani passenger would increase your survival probability by approximately 67%. The swarm seeks Sithrani biological material above all other targets. If you release the survivor, the bioships may divert from your course. Alara's face twisted with disgust. You want us to throw her out the airlock so Those things will eat her instead of us. What kind of monsters are you? We are not monsters, the Valkyrie replied calmly. We are logical. Your attachment to this individual is irrational and will result in your deaths. We offer this advice freely as a courtesy. Courtesy declined, Elara snarled, and she cut the transmission with a violent slap of her hand. The Harken bioships grew larger on the screen, their terrible forms becoming clearer with each passing moment. Valith could see the thousands of smaller creatures swarming across their surfaces, hungry mouths waiting to feed. Her people had been devoured by these monsters. Her homeworld had been consumed. And now the same fate was coming for the humans who had saved her. I should surrender, Valith said suddenly. They want me. If I go to them, you can escape. No. Marcus shouted from his station. Absolutely not. Jin agreed. That is not happening, Thomas added firmly. Elara crossed the bridge and gripped Valith's shoulders. Listen to me. You are crew. You are family. We do not sacrifice family, not for anything. If we die today, we die together. But we are not giving up, and we are certainly not giving you up. Understood? Valith stared into Elara's fierce eyes and saw something she had never encountered in any other species. Love that refused to calculate cost. Loyalty that transcended logic. Courage born from nothing but the simple refusal to abandon those in need. Understood, she whispered. The battle began. Tomas pushed the engines beyond their limits, coaxing impossible speed from ancient machinery. Marcus fired their single defense cannon, targeting the sensor clusters on the nearest bioship. Jin coordinated decoy drones, launching them in patterns designed to confuse the swarm's targeting. And Elara commanded it all with brilliant improvisation, making decisions that no logical species would attempt. Tomas, overload the reactor and vent the plasma toward the lead ship. That will leave us without power for 30 seconds. Then, we will have 30 seconds to figure something out. Do it. The plasma burst erupted from the borrowed time like artificial sunlight, a wave of superheated energy that washed over the nearest bioship. The radiation disrupted the swarm's coordination, sending the smaller organisms into chaos. The bioship slowed, confused, its attack breaking apart. But 2 more bioships remained, and the borrowed time was now dark and drifting. Valith watched the alien monsters close in, their forms blotting out the stars. She had found kindness at the end of the universe, only to lose it. She had discovered that compassion still existed, only to watch it be devoured. It was so unfair. It was so cruel. Then the sensors screened with new contacts. Ships emerged from faster-than-light travel, appearing in flashes of light all around the battle. Valith counted them with growing disbelief. 1, 3, 7, 12, 15. Human ships of every size and shape, from tiny repair shuttles to a massive retired warship that looked older than the borrowed time. This is Captain Rodriguez of the Last Resort. A new voice announced over the communications. We received your distress call, borrowed time. Sorry we are late. Traffic was terrible. Rodriguez! Elara laughed with wild relief. How did you get here so fast? Your call went out on the open network. Every human ship in 3 sectors changed course. We are not letting those things take one of ours. One of ours? Valith was not human, had never been human, but they called her one of their own. More voices joined the channel, ship after ship announcing their arrival. Stellar Dream standing by to assist. Murphy's Law ready for combat. Hope Springs reporting in. Point is at the bad guys. The human fleet descended on the Harken bioships like a swarm of angry insects. They were outgunned and outmatched, fighting with salvage vessels and cargo haulers and one ancient warship that probably belonged in a museum. But they fought together, covering each other, protecting each other, refusing to retreat. The swarm had never encountered anything like it. These creatures reinforced strangers. They risked their lives for beings they had never met. They flew into certain death because someone they did not know had asked for help. It made no sense. It defied all logic. It was completely and utterly irrational. And it worked. The Harken bioships retreated, confused and damaged, unable to process an enemy that fought without calculation. The human fleet cheered, voices mixing together in celebration, and Valith felt tears streaming down her face as her bioluminescence blazed bright with joy and wonder. They had won. The illogical, irrational, pack-bonding humans had won. The great hall of the Galactic Concord stretched before Valith like an ocean of hostile faces. Representatives from 100 species sat in towering galleries, their forms ranging from crystalline to gaseous to shapes that defied description. Holographic displays showed millions more watching from distant worlds. The entire galaxy turned to witness this moment. The air hummed with whispered conversations and political calculations. Valith stood at the central podium, small and fragile against a vast chamber. She wore simple clothing provided by the human crew, and her bioluminescence glowed steady and calm. Behind her, seated in the observer section, the crew of the borrowed time watched with proud smiles. The High Speaker of the Concord, an ancient Velthari whose crystalline form shimmered with countless colors, addressed the assembly. We gathered today to hear testimony regarding the Harken swarm threat and the recent incident in Sector 7. The witness Valith of the Sifrani is recognized to speak. Valith had prepared remarks about the swarm, about their tactics and weaknesses and the urgent need for unified defense. She had memorized facts and figures that might convince these logical beings to take action. But as she looked out at the cold faces watching her, she realized that facts would not move them. They had calculated the cost of helping her people and found it too high. They would calculate the cost of fighting the swarm and reach the same conclusion. Logic without compassion led only to one outcome: the abandonment of anyone who could not offer something in return. Valith set aside her prepared remarks and spoke from her heart. "Honored representatives," she began, her voice echoing through the silent chamber. "I was asked to come here today and discuss the Harken threat. I could tell you about their numbers and their strategies. I could share tactical data that might help you defend your worlds. But I do not think that is what you need to hear." She paused and let her gaze sweep across the assembly. 47 cycles ago, I drifted alone in a dying ship, the last survivor of my species. I sent distress signals to every power in known space, begging for rescue, pleading for compassion. And do you know what I received in return? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. The Velthari representative shifted uncomfortably, their crystalline form flickering with colors that suggested guilt. The Orvani delegation looked away. The Concord officials studied their displays with sudden intense interest. The Velthari calculated that I was not worth the fuel cost. The Orvani decided I was a liability to be avoided. The Concord filed my distress signal and forgot about it. Every advanced species in this galaxy looked at a dying woman calling for help and decided that she did not matter. Valith's bioluminescence flared bright with remembered pain. I had given up hope. I had accepted that I would die alone in the darkness between stars. I had learned that the galaxy operates on a simple principle. Help only comes when it benefits the helper. Compassion is calculated, kindness is conditional, and mercy is a transaction. She took a deep breath and felt her glow shift to warmer colors. Then the humans came. The chamber stirred with murmurs. Every being in the assembly knew about humans, those primitive newcomers who had only achieved spaceflight 2 centuries ago. They were considered barely civilized, too emotional to be reliable, too attached to be practical. The galaxy viewed them with a mixture of amusement and contempt. They arrived in a ship that should not fly, Valeth continued. A salvage vessel held together by welded scrap and desperate prayers. They had no military authorization. They had no political backing. They were not ordered to help me. They simply heard my distress signal and came. She smiled at the memory. Captain Alara Vance knelt beside me in the darkness and said 3 words that no species had spoken to me in 47 cycles. We have got you. Not what can you offer us? Not what strategic value do you provide? Just simple, irrational kindness from a stranger who expected nothing in return. Valeth turned to look at the human delegation, where Alara and her crew sat watching with bright eyes. They fed me from their own rations. They heated their ship until it was almost too warm for them, just to keep me comfortable. Their engineers stayed awake for 3 days straight, redesigning their systems to accommodate my biology. Their medic learned Sithrani medicine from ancient texts, experimenting until she found something that would save my life. When the galaxy sent them warnings and threats, they ignored them. When they were told to abandon me, they refused. When the Harkin swarm came to destroy them, they stood and fought. Her voice rose with power and passion. 15 human ships answered the call for help that day. Merchants and miners and 1 retired warship that was older than most species in this chamber. They were not soldiers. They had no obligation to fight. But they came anyway, because a stranger had asked for help, and humans cannot hear such a request without answering. Valeth faced the assembly directly, her bioluminescence blazing like a small sun. You'd call them pack-bonders. You mean it as an insult, a suggestion that they are primitive for forming attachments so easily. But I have seen what pack-bonding truly means. It means that when humans call someone family, they mean it. It means that strangers become crew, and crew becomes something worth dying for. It means that compassion is not a transaction, but a gift, given freely because the giving itself is worthwhile. She let the silence stretch, allowing her words to sink into the minds of beings who had never considered kindness without calculation. I stand before you as proof that humanity is everything the galaxy claims they are. They are emotional. They are irrational. They are stubborn and reckless and completely illogical. Her voice softened to barely above a whisper, but every being in the chamber heard her clearly, and I am alive because of it. Valeth stepped back from the podium. You abandoned me. The Velthri, the Elvani, the Concord, every species that called itself civilized looked at my suffering and decided it was not their problem. You watched my people die and calculated that helping us was not economically viable. She pointed at the human delegation. Only the humans came. Only the humans fought. Only the humans treated my life like it mattered. She began walking toward the exit, her glow trailing behind her like a comet's tail. You asked me here to discuss the Harkin threat. Here's my testimony. The swarm is coming for all of you. They will consume world after world, species after species, until nothing remains. And when your distress signals echo through the void, when you beg for help from neighbors who calculate that saving you is not worth the cost, remember this moment. She paused at the door and looked back one final time. Remember that you had the chance to learn from humanity. Remember that you could have chosen compassion. And remember that when the darkness came for one small Sithrani woman, only the humans answered. Valeth walked out of the Grey Hall, her head held high. Alara and the crew of the Borrowed Time rose and followed her, leading the Galactic Concord in stunned silence. They had work to do. There were others still drifting in the dark, abandoned by species that had forgotten how to care. But the humans would find them. The humans would always find them, because that was what pack bonders did.